Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're going to unpack a truly epic clash from the 17th century. We are looking at a historic, head-on confrontation between an immovable king who firmly believed in the freedom of the seas and an unstoppable corporate monopoly determined to control global trade at absolutely any cost. So let's dive right into this central question. What actually happens when an unstoppable monopoly meets an immovable king? When we think of massive multinational corporations today, we imagine immense power and influence. But back in the 1600s, the Dutch East India Company, or the VOC, literally had their own armies, their own navies, and a completely ruthless drive for total market control. What happens when a corporate machine of that unprecedented scale runs squarely into a sovereign leader who absolutely refuses to bend? Well, we're going to explore a fight over global trade that fundamentally changed history. The king at the very center of this story is Sultan Hasanuddin, the 16th Sultan of the Kingdom of Goa, which was located in modern-day South Sulawesi. He waged one of the most stubborn, relentless resistance campaigns against colonial control ever recorded. In fact, his bravery and sheer tenacity on the battlefield were so formidable that his enemies, the Dutch, actually gave him a famous moniker. They called him Haantjes van het, which translates to the Rooster of the East. Part 1. The Rooster of the East. Born in Malambase Daeng Matawang, Kareng Bonto Manape on January 12, 1631, in the royal center of Somba Opu, Hasanuddin wasn't just a fierce warrior, he was meticulously groomed for leadership from day one. Thanks to his brilliant prime minister, Kareng Batenggaluang, a man completely renowned for his vast library and his mastery of world geography, the young prince received a world-class education. We're talking military strategy, Islamic theology, and statecraft. Because of this profound preparation, when his father passed away in 1653, the young sultan was highly educated, politically astute, and entirely ready to lead as he ascended the throne at just 22 years old. Section 2. Open Seas versus the Dutch Monopoly. Okay, so in the 17th century, Goa controlled Makassar. This was a massive, incredibly vital international trading hub that connected the highly lucrative Spice Islands to China, India, Arabia, and Europe. But this setup created a stark ideological clash. You see, Goa operated on a policy of mare liberum, or the open sea. Sultan Hasanuddin held a deeply rooted philosophical, religious, and economic conviction that God created the sea for all humankind to share freely, so he actively encouraged open trade. The Dutch VOC, on the other hand, they absolutely did not want open markets. They demanded an absolute ironclad monopoly over the nutmeg and clove trade in eastern Indonesia, and they demanded that Goa expel all Portuguese, British, and local spice merchants immediately. Because of these deeply held convictions, Sultan Hasanuddin flatly refused the Dutch demands to restrict trade. He looked at their ultimatums and simply said, no way. He was not going to betray his core principles of a free and open world. And this flat refusal set his prosperous kingdom on an inevitable, catastrophic collision course with a global superpower. Section 3. The Makassar War explodes. Naturally, this ideological standoff couldn't last. It ignited the massive Makassar War, which raged from 1666 to 1669. And we need to be clear, this wasn't just a minor skirmish. It was one of the most costly, massive military campaigns the VOC ever conducted in the East Indies. Goa's naval power was incredibly formidable, and the Dutch quickly realized they couldn't win this fight alone. VOC Admiral Cornelius Spielman needed an edge, and he found it by forging a strategic alliance with Arung Palaka. Now, Arung Palaka was a Bugis prince from Bone, and a regional rival who sought to free his own people from Goa's dominance. This calculated Dutch-Bugis alliance was a real game-changer, dramatically shifting the balance of power against Sultan Hasanuddin. Section 4. The Treaty of Bangaya. Ultimately, the combined might of the Dutch naval fleets and the Bugis land forces proved to be just overwhelming. After heavy naval bombardments and grueling, grinding land warfare, Goa was backed into a corner. To protect his civilian population, the Sultan was forced to sign a treaty on November 18, 1667. The Dutch demands were absolutely crushing. They were explicitly designed to systematically dismantle Goa's independence and its global reach. Goa had to completely surrender its trade monopoly to the VOC, immediately expel all foreign merchants like the Portuguese and British, and dismantle its vital coastal fortifications, saving only a single fort. Literally everything Hasanuddin had stood for regarding open trade was systematically stripped away by this one document. Section 5. The Final Defiant Stand. But remember, the Rooster of the East was not a man to quietly accept subjugation. The ideals of an open sea and an independent kingdom just ran too deep. Refusing to live quietly under colonial rule, Sultan Hasanuddin broke the treaty just months later and took up arms once more. This renewed defiance culminated in a devastating siege at Samba Opu Fortress, Gowa's main stronghold, in June 1669. It was an agonizing final stand. For 10 days, the fortress endured brutal, relentless cannon fire and vicious hand-to-hand combat. Finally, the fortress walls were breached. This tragic defeat officially brought an end to Gowa's magnificent era as an independent maritime empire. Looking back, it is truly staggering how rapidly this entire conflict unfolded over just a few short, tragic years. From the outbreak of the massive Makassar War in 1666 to the heavy losses that forced the Treaty of Bangaya in 1667. Then, just 2 years later, in 1669, the final rebellion fails with the fall of Samba Opu, leading directly to the Sultan's abdication. And finally, his death just a year later in 1670. It's an entire lifetime of fierce resistance compressed into a furious 4-year window. Section 6. A Hero's Lasting Legacy. Following the fall of his primary fortress, Hasanuddin abdicated the throne in 1669. He completely refused to cooperate with or serve under the Dutch authorities in any capacity. Instead, he retreated to private life, dedicating his final months to teaching Islam and guiding his local community until his untimely death in 1670 at the young age of 39. But, the story of the Rooster of the East doesn't actually end there. Even though his empire fell to corporate and colonial ambitions, his fierce defense of freedom was never forgotten. Centuries later, in 1973, his unyielding spirit was officially immortalized when the Indonesian government proudly declared him a national hero of Indonesia, or Pahlawan Nasional. Today, his legacy surrounds the people of South Sulawesi. It serves as a constant, everyday reminder of the sheer courage it takes to defy a monopoly. He lives on through some of Indonesia's premier institutions, from Hasanuddin University in Makassar, guiding the next generation of scholars, to the Sultan Hasanuddin International Airport, connecting the region to the rest of the world, and Kodam 14/Hasanuddin, which instills his bravery into the regional military command. As we wrap up this explainer, I want you to consider this. Sultan Hasanuddin lost his fortress, he lost his throne, and eventually he lost his kingdom, all because he firmly believed that the oceans were a gift to all of humanity, not the property of a single corporation. So what principles would you be willing to lose everything for? Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive into history, and I really hope this sparks your curiosity to go out and learn even more.